Hey guys, we're back with the 52 Power Wagon here. Today I'm going to add or start working on a small console that I want to add right below the dashboard. You remember before I kind of didn't want to cut up the original dash. So what I want to do is I want to make a little console that mounts right here below the ignition switch so that I can mount my fuel gauge, the power window switches, and then the control knobs for the Vintage Air Mini, which you can see I've installed hanging down below there. So I've mapped it out. I've got probably a good 4 inches below the ignition switch here that I can use to mount this console. So I'm going to first get a piece of cardboard so that I can map out the shape that I want in there and make sure that everything fits. And then from there we'll get to cutting out the holes for the different components and bending it up. So let's get to it. Here we are inside. I brought my cardboard template in. So that you remember we cut out this contour where that little part in the dash sticks out. Marked a hole, and I made a couple of notes on here about some of the dimensions. Put a center line down the center of here. So what I've done is I've transferred it over to this larger piece of cardboard that's actually just a file folder, and I've traced out, you can see at the top there, I've traced out the same contour, put a center line down. This line across the top here is where the bend is going to be. I've marked my holes, and these holes are actually off center a bit because there was some holes in the dash and I want to use those instead of drilling some new ones. Over on the side here you can see that I've made a mark down right there, which is going to be the edge of our little console where that bend is going to be. So that's about 1 inch that's going to cover because we don't want just a bare edge on the side. So now I've laid out the three components that I'm going to kind of put into this console here. On the left is my fuel gauge, which we had another video on. This is a bracket that I made up quickly to hold the power steering switches, so I'm using it as a template for my power steering switches. And then this is the bezel for my Vintage Air AC control unit. So I've taken the bezel off the switch set there, and I've just laid it over top so I can trace out exactly where I want it. Now you notice that I haven't made a mark along the bottom where I'm going to cut and bend at the bottom, because I wanted to see how all these things fit before I actually made the final decision of how deep that I wanted to make this console. So now that I've got everything laid out, you can see that I've left a little bit of space around the edge of each component, because as you can see in the Vintage Air unit, there's actually some components on the back side that stick out past the perimeter of the switchboard. You can see there on the left and right side there's actually some stuff that sticks out, so you don't want to have it right tight up against this top line or on the sides there, or any other components, just so that there's no interference when you go to actually install it. Also, last thing that I wanted to make note is I left kind of some empty space down here, which I wanted to have available in case I needed to add a toggle switch or some other indicator later on. So I've got a little bit of room there if I want to add something in a later date, maybe just a simple toggle switch that you drill a hole and put in. So I'm going to mark these all out and then start taking it out, transferring it over to the metal piece. Okay, I highlighted some of the cutouts so that you can see them a little better here. A couple of things I wanted to point out before I take this out, cut it all out, and then transfer it over to the metal. You'll see up in the corner here that I made a perpendicular line up, but the line this way is not perpendicular. What you need to do here is make sure that this is your bend line. So you can't have anything sticking out on your bend line in this corner. And it's not so much in this corner, but down here. If we had made this cut perpendicular to this flange, it would have stuck out below this bend line along here, which would have caused a problem when you went to bend it. So you got to keep in mind that you're going to do your long bends first. So you're going to do this bottom one and this top one first, then you're going to bend in the sides. So up here, the other thing is that you should leave this cutout until after you've made this top bend. Because see this little bit that's left here, if you were to cut this piece out here, there's not enough for your metal bender to grab onto, and this will end up causing a kind of a hump in this area where the bend doesn't really match the rest. So everything is marked out, and so I'm going to cut this out and go out and transfer it to the metal. So once we do that, we can cut out these notches, cut everything out of the sheet metal. But what you want to remember, and I'll remind you once we get it out onto the metal, is that you want to prep your metal surface first. So you can mark all these lines out on there, or at least mark out the space where for the piece that you're going to be using. But you want to prep it first, especially if you're going to be just doing a brushed coating and clear coat it. You want to make sure that it's all nicely brushed first before you start bending and cutting this stuff out, because it's a lot easier to do it when you have just a bare piece of metal, as opposed to once everything is cut out and there's a whole bunch of holes in it, and you don't get an even, it's much harder to get a sort of even brushed finish once the piece has been cut out. Okay, so here we are. We've got our template transferred to the metal, and we've got a couple of pilot holes drilled there for the holes, and we're going to start cutting everything out and bending the edges. All right, guys, here it is. Just about ready to do the bending on it. So cut out all the holes. I've buffed everything up. I've buffed all the marker off of it. I've test fit to make sure everything fits. The switch fit, and the bezel for the heater controls fits in there. So I'm just gonna flip it over, and just remember that lots of times that you get confused and you've got your lines on this side, but actually you need to flip it over because the bends are actually bending away from you. So with that being said, I've buffed it up nicely again. And the reason I do that, if you buff it up like this and you decide that you just want to clear coat it and have sort of a brushed look, you can do that. But you can also, if you don't like the brushed, you can paint right over top of it later on, whatever color you'd like. So this one's ready to go. I just wanted to show you down here. So with this cutout here, all I did is I used a step drill on either end to make the holes, and then I cut out the bridge in between. For these squares here, I used my small Dremel with the cutting blade on it, and I used just a regular hole saw here, and then I had to sort of enlarge the opening just a little bit to make the gauges fit. So with that, and also you'll notice I didn't cut out this. I mentioned that before. I didn't cut out this indentation here yet, because we're going to make the bend and then we're going to cut that part out. So the next time you see it, it'll be bent and ready to go. All right, it's all done. So I wanted to show you in sort of some lower light. Turn the key on, the power window switches light up. Got everything wired in for all the dash lights. I haven't hooked up any of the AC or the fuel gauge yet, but that'll come next, and it's all polished up and clear coated to match the rest of the trim in the interior. So thanks for watching, and if you have any comments, leave them in the comments section below.